Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I'm so happy to be here with all of you. Before I get started, I want to understand a little bit about all of you. I believe you're in nonprofit work, and some of you may be bigger, some of you may be smaller, so it'll just kind of give me a sense. So if you don't mind, I would love to know if you're the one-man show right now, raise your hand. You've got no staff, but you're working and starting a nonprofit, okay? If you've got up to 5 employees, raise your hand. All right, let's go 5 to 10. All right, and then let's go 10 to 25. All right, anybody bigger than 25? All right, fantastic. That just kind of helps me to understand exactly who you all are. Thank you all so much for being here. I want to spend a little bit of time today talking a little bit about my journey in the nonprofit space, and then give you a sense of some of the tools that I've learned along the way that have really helped to propel our nonprofit, LaAmistad. So I'll just start from the beginnings, right? They were humble. I was at a church at Peachtree Church, and I was teaching little kids like this to skate around a gym. And that exact same year, the gentleman at the church started a program called LaAmistad. He wanted to do some after-school outreach to the Latino kids that lived across the street, and he asked me to skate them around the gym when they'd get off the school bus, feed them a snack, and then they would go over and meet other congregants for tutoring. Seemed easy enough. Seemed like it would be really fun. But at the same time, I was working a full-time job as a fundraising and management counsel, doing large campaigns and a lot of fundraising. So this was kind of a side gig, right? Thought it would be great. And so I began to work with these students. And I spent an entire school year with the same 20 kids, getting off the bus every day, skating them around the gym until they were sweaty. And then, of course, I began to fall in love with those little faces, right? How could you not? And their families were incredible. I was adopted in Massachusetts, and I was raised by 2 Portuguese people in a very niche neighborhood with Portuguese folks all around. And so I had that culture. And so when I fell in love with these families, I walked in, they offered me a tamale, and I said, wow, I just love these people, and I wanted to help. And I saw one of the most affluent churches that we're in providing skating to them. And then I see kids that are sleeping on mattresses on the floor with clothes piled up, with parents that are giving me their last tamale, living on $30,000 a year. And it really just pulled at my heart. And I really wanted to go ahead and do something. So I started to learn Spanish. I started to help the parents as a volunteer. I started to bring them furniture and anything that they could possibly need, because I just felt called to this work. And so this was just a ministry of the church. And I began to get more and more involved, like many of you probably did when you started. And it began to grow. And I began to take more and more roles within this small little after-school program. It became a nonprofit. So this is 2001. In 2006, it became a nonprofit. And in 2008, I was asked by the church to go ahead and begin to manage this nonprofit. And I stepped in. And I'll be honest, I was shocked when I realized the budget, small, $100,000. And I'm the one-man show, right? And I'm sure that can resonate with a lot of you when we get started in this work. And so I began to look at ways for us to begin to grow. And at first it was really simple. I began to get some grants, get a little bit more funding, make sure the bottom didn't fall out on the months where the cash flow was really low. And began to build a team. And in those early days, it wasn't hard. I had 3 other people working with me. I knew them well. We worked together every day. But as things began to grow, it began to get just a little more complex, right? You begin to add another person because you need somebody to do this. And of course, you're the one who has all of the understandings of what you want each person to do, so you train them, right? You become their boss. You get another direct report, you get another direct report, you get another direct report, and all of a sudden, you begin to drown in all of these staffing, but you've got all of the knowledge here. And so you're trying to do everything for everybody, and then you're still in programming, and then you're still watching the budget, and you're the one providing all of the oversight. And honestly, it becomes so overwhelming, right? And I'm sure that a lot of you are maybe there right now or are going through this. And so part of what began to happen is that I began to drown, right? Too much, too fast, We're growing. We've got all of these staff that are coming in. And I began to try to figure out, well, the hardest part with managing all these people is understanding how can you begin to communicate with all of these different folks, right? Everybody's different. And it's complicated, right? You'll have one person, they're young, they want you to send them an email. Just send it to me in an email and I'll get it done. You're like, okay, I got that, I got you, right? So I'll send everybody an email. Then you got the other person who wants a meeting. Then you've got somebody else who's like, no, why don't you use that task list thing in your Outlook, right? And that's how I want to be communicated with, right? And then others, they want lists. And then all of a sudden you find yourself, oh, well, I need another meeting. How am I going to go ahead and make sure that I can be all of these things to all of these people? And so then you become more and more overwhelmed. So of course, like any of you probably, you start looking for systems. How can I find the perfect system in order to make this easier on myself, right? Right. So I start searching for the solutions. So I start looking and I'm like, oh, I know. Let me get a new CRM. That'll do it. A good CRM is going to be the key to all of it, right? So of course, you find yourself with a good black box. That's going to do it. That's going to help everything. Well, no, that's great for your donors, but that's not how you can communicate with your whole team. That's not going to work. So then you look at other opportunities. Oh, Salesforce, it's free for nonprofits. Right. That's going to be the answer. Once I get in Salesforce, then I'm going to have all of the answers, right? Then you're like, oh, the strategic plan. Yes, let's go ahead and do another strategic plan. And then, through that, I'm going to find the answers. And so continuing to look at all of these different tools, right? And then, of course, you got to add some more meetings. And you find yourself just like, oh, my gosh, what am I going to do? And so fast forward, this was me, an HR system, right? But this was us in probably 2018. So I've fast forward, right? I went from a $100,000 budget to, at that point, we're probably sitting at about almost $1 million budget. So we had some money, we've had some growth, we've got some staff, we're opening new after-school locations throughout the city, trying to manage it all. And you go ahead and you're here, and you start to grow, and you start to grow, and then all of a sudden, you hit the ceiling. And you don't know how to break through. And you just start spinning your wheels, and you become really stuck. So here I am, right, lost, and I'm looking for some tool and some answer and some solution. And I also, at the same time, started a couple charter schools, and I found myself as the board member of these schools, and I started hearing about the system. It was called EOS. Has anybody ever heard of EOS in the room? Okay, it's an entrepreneurial operating system, and it started about 20 years ago, and they started using it at my school. At the same time, another board member who had just acquired another $1 million company, he was using it and telling me all of the great stories of how it's really helped their business, how it has given them all of the tools that they need in order to be able to have the transparency that you need when you're managing people, because you can't be a boss to everybody, right? And so I began to learn more about it, right? And one of the first things that I did was I read this book here called Traction. Has anybody ever read the book Traction, right? And it began to really resonate with me. I began to see, wow, it makes a lot of sense. The system could really work. But in the nonprofit world, in order to implement something like this, when you have a team of 30 people, it can be really hard, and you're trying to do it on your own. And I really wanted to go down this road, but I also knew that I was going to need some help, right? But I want to go ahead and break down a little bit about EOS before I tell you how I got there, because I think it's important for those in the room who have not heard of Traction or EOS to kind of understand the basic. So EOS gives us it says, you know what? Oh, decided to go fast on me. Your business is in the middle, right? Your nonprofit. And then you've got these 6 core components. And in order for your business to be strong, those 6 core components also have to be strong. And it starts here, right? We all have this vision that we want to see grow. And so in order to make sure that you've got a strong vision, there's 2 things that will happen when you begin to work with EOS. You'll answer these 8 questions, And then those answers and that vision have to be shared by everybody in your organization, right? You can't just have it here. Everybody has to buy in. You also have to make sure you have the people. How do you know you have the right people? I think people are the hardest thing for us in nonprofit work, right? If you can get great talent and great people, you're going to soar, but how do you know they're great people? And then what happens when you get the wrong people? How do you know they're the wrong people? What do you do about it? You know, do you have sidebars, or do you actually have honest conversations with them? And so part of this piece is getting the right people in the right seats, right? How do you know they're the right person? Well, EOS teaches us that you go ahead and develop your core values. So for LaAmistad, we look for people that show kindness, passion, excellence, teamwork, and perseverance. Those are our 5 core values. And we're not apologetic. We hire, fire, review, reward, and recognize against them. Somebody comes into an interview, I talk about them, I say, do they resonate with you? Because if they don't, this is not a place for you. There's the door, right? And at the same time, you start to look internally, right? And so we developed those core values based on my employees that I had. But did everybody on the team have all of those values? No, they didn't. And some hard conversations started to happen. So you have those core values, you want to understand, are they the right people? And then how do you know if they're in the right seats? And so what EOS tells us is you want to understand GWC. Do they get it? Do they get the job? Do they want the job? But more importantly for me, do they have the capacity to do it? And when one of those is a no, they're not the right person. And if you continue to spin your wheels with the wrong people, you're going to continue to spin your wheels, and you're never going to break through that ceiling. And that's where honestly, we were stuck. We were stuck in the structure, and we were stuck in some of the people that we had that at one point were fantastic, but as we grew and it became more demanding and it became more difficult, they really weren't the right people. You've got, of course, data. You want to be able to measure everything, because we're nonprofits. We want grant money. Everything's got to be measurable, and you got to get that data, and sometimes your staff doesn't understand the importance of it. You got to make sure you've got some processes. Who here has all their processes documented? Now that's overwhelming. Let's get that done. Oh. Of course, then all these issues pop up every single day as you're working, right? And then, of course, you're really wanting to you want to have traction. You want to be able to have meetings. You want to be able to have goals. You want to make sure that you're not just spinning your wheels every day trying to put out fires and you're never continuing to move the car down the road, right? That's where we can all get stuck. So I want to tell you a little bit more about some of these components. So there are 5 tools for EOS. The first thing is this vision traction organizer. Then we have an accountability chart, which is a fancy word for an org chart, right, which we all have. Of course, mine was really broken when you saw me over 13 direct reports. That's not a good idea, y'all. Okay, you shouldn't have any more than 7, and that's too many. You want to have rocks. Rocks are 90-day goals. What are you going to make sure that you're accomplishing every 90 days in order to continue to make this bus move down the road? You got to have a good meeting pulse. You want to have meetings that are meaty. How many times you sit in meetings and everybody just talks about everything and then you walk out and there's no action, right? We've all spun our wheels there. Then you have another meeting and another meeting, and then nothing's really happening. And then you want to have a scorecard. How can I, as the executive director now of a team of 50 people, know that everything is happening at every level on any given day? So it starts with your vision traction organizer, the vision, right? And so in EOS, we all have, in nonprofit work, we have a strategic plan that sits on our desk that we spend a lot of money on. You get a facilitator, and then all of a sudden, you know, how do you make sure that everything's getting executed? Maybe you look at it annually, make your annual goals, and that's really honestly about how we were using it. But what EOS did was it helped us to take all of those goals and put them into this vision traction organizer. Starting with, what are your core values, your core focus? What's your 10-year target? Strategic plans take us to 5 years, and then we get there, and then we make another one, but you lose your vision, right? All of a sudden, right now in my strategic plan, I'm 1 year out. But in my VTO, I'm 10 years out, so I can continue to make sure that I'm moving down the road. You gotta have a good marketing strategy, right? And then, of course, your 3-year plan, your 1-year plan, quarterly rocks, right? Quarterly goals, and then your issues list. So there's always issues that are going to pop up. We can't avoid them. Every day there are fires that are going to have to be put out. I work with children that are very vulnerable, right? Free and reduced lunch Latino kids. Lots of issues there that have to be dealt with when they come up that we can't avoid, right? So it puts it all in this really neat format. So you can take your strategic plan, you put it on 2 pages, and then you make sure that you're sharing it with everybody in your organization, and it gives you all of these tools. It pushed us. When I started EOS and I went into the very first meeting, I'll share a little bit with you. I was able to write a grant and get a facilitator. That was $50,000 for 2 years, and it was the best $50,000 I've ever spent. He's fantastic. I can call him anytime, and he can help me to work through any hard problems. At first, things were really difficult, but once you get the right team, it gets a lot easier. But we had to restructure. I had to figure out, who was I? Am I this integrator, which is what I was doing, everything, or am I really the visionary with lots of big ideas? I'm the visionary. It was very obvious when I got in the room and began to understand that. Then I had to make sure I found this integrator. Well, I found her. She's my associate director. And together, we're rocket fuel. At the top, I have 1 direct report now. 1. It is fantastic, I'll tell you right now. And then below, for nonprofit work, this is, of course, a business model, right? But in the nonprofit work, I have a program director and a development director. And that right there is my leadership team. So much more simplistic than ever. This is kind of hard to see, but the restructuring, this is actually a screenshot out of my 90s software that shows everybody that is on my team. A lot of the smaller roles are collapsed below. But you can see I'm up here as a visionary. I've got an integrator, development director, program director. Under my development director, we've got, of course, the development team. And then my program director's got the heads of the after-school program, the adult education program. But it really simplified our org structure. Not one person has more than 5 direct reports. Puts them all in teams and makes it all manageable. And then it gives me the tools so that I can see what's happening at the bottom. One of the most eye-opening things is this, and I'm sure you may have seen this before, right? And what happens with us is that we're working on all of the sand all day, all the interruptions, all the fires you got to put out, and then all of a sudden, you don't have the ability to work on the big picture items, work on the business, and then all of a sudden, nothing's going to fit in your glass. But what EOS teaches us is that every 90 days, you want to develop your rocks. And then every week, you need to work on those rocks, right? And those are the big things that you've got to do to work on your business, to grow your business. And so if you work on those, and you get those a little bit at a time into your jar, then when all of these other things fall in, it's all going to fit. And it makes it manageable. It makes it palatable. Makes it achievable. So you work on those rocks. When you're working on your rocks, this guy likes to skip on me. Of course, you want to make them smart, right? Making sure, and you don't want to have too many. And I'll tell you, I'll give you a little secret if you begin to do this. Don't make people rocks. I'm going to hire a new development director. That's a bad rock because you don't have control over it. You don't know if you're going to find that talent or not. I've made some bad rocks, for sure, as we've learned how to use the system. But what I've also learned is that none of us are perfect. So for us, 80% is great. I don't expect 100% of rocks to be complete of anybody. It's not achievable. We're not perfect, right? So we have to make sure that we give ourselves that flexibility, because I can definitely be hard on myself. So every quarter, my teams have these quarterly planning sessions. I start with leadership. We meet as a team. We do a full day. We look at the last quarter. We report out on our rocks. We look at all of the data, and then we develop the rocks for the next quarter. Once we develop our rocks are the company rocks, right? And we really pull them straight out of that vision traction organizer, because everything is there. Everything that we need to work on for the next 3 years, for the next 1 year are there. We look at them, then we decide, all right, what rock are we going to take next quarter? Take that rock, and then all of our departments begin to meet, and then they develop their rocks. So everything is working toward that vision and gets everybody unified, it gets everybody bought in. And then, of course, down at the lower levels, they can have individual rocks that they want to achieve. And that really has helped us to begin to get our teams and get everybody rowing in the same direction, right? Because that's what we want. So, as I said, these are the priorities, and then we're looking for about 80% completion. Now, One of the biggest challenges I had in those early days was getting everybody to make sure that I was getting the data that I needed to report out on these grants and getting them to understand why it was important. You know, everybody wants to go ahead and tutor the kid, but nobody wants to do the math assessment. Well, I've got to have the math assessment to get the grant money, right? And then, so the scorecard is one of the best tools that we have now. I've got scorecards for every one of my teams all the way down, and we can measure almost anything in a variety of different ways, right? But your scorecard is going to focus on those major activities, right? Anything that gets measured gets managed because folks are having to pay attention to it, right? And if you're not keeping score, it's just practice. So you've really got to make sure that there's some grit there, right? That you get some traction with this. It's the only way that we can know how we're doing, but it really has helped us because the department scorecards, it becomes more and more granular as you go down. So I can go down to the lower levels and I can see, and there's stuff in there, they're yes and no questions. You know, did you send your weekly email to your after-school volunteers? Yes or no? Simple. Doesn't have to be, you know, huge numbers and huge metrics. Anything that you want to make sure is happening and getting completed, they're on our scorecard. Basic scorecards look like this. You got your measurable, you have who owns it, and then you have the goal. I can see it for 13 weeks, and I can see the scorecards for all of our different departments. We actually utilize a software put out by EOS. There's a couple of them. One's called, I think, Traction. We use what's called 90, and it is the best software that I've ever invested in. When you get a facilitator, you get it for half off, and everything lives there. Everybody on my team has 90. I can see all their to-do lists. I can see all the issues that are bubbling up, right? And it really has helped to put everything in one place for me. I live in 90. I love 90. It's my best friend. But, you know, what's going to make you get these 90-day rocks done are going to be your ability to continue to make sure that you're looking at them. They set 90-day rocks because science shows that after 90 days, we tend to trail off. It's just too long to look at something. So 90 days is about as long as our attention span is, right? So it's a good practice. And then in the way that we want to get there is we have these meetings. So every single Monday at 9 a.m., my leadership team and I meet. And we have a level 10 meeting. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about a level 10 meeting. But it's a weekly meeting. It helps to get alignment, right? So your left hand knows what your right hand is doing. It helps to make sure there's accountability. If somebody gets a to-do last week, it's due at your next weekly. And it's in the software. And we can see everybody's on the leadership team. So if Mario did not finish up what he was supposed to, we're going to call him out on it. Because he needs to be accountable, right? To continue to make sure we're rowing in the same direction. We also put all the issues up there. See, the issues in EOS don't have to be bad. It doesn't have to be a bad issue. An issue could be an opportunity, right? Leadership Atlanta's application is out, and we can apply to get somebody to work on a project next year. Anybody have any ideas? That was on our issues list last week, right? It could also be, hey, somebody's continuously tardy, and it's really driving our development team crazy. What should they do about it? So we can put anything up there. And you can put the issues up all week long so that when you get to the meeting, they're already there, and you already know exactly what you're going to be talking about. Everybody in the room, and then it's called a level 10 meeting because you rate it. And I'm going to show you the structure of the meetings because it's fantastic. We run the 90 software in the meeting. So we go into the meeting, we hit start meeting, and then it, boom, start with good news. Personal and professional bright spot, go. Well, my personal bright spot today is that my son got his certified black belt yesterday. He's 10 years old. I'm so happy for him. Personal bright spot this week for me. Happened yesterday, right? Professional bright spot. I'm here speaking with all of you. That's it. Go around the room. You're sharing a little bit about yourself personally and professionally, right? And then you do a scorecard review. Everybody on the leadership team has weekly items on the scorecard. They need to put their data in. We look at it all. Mine are donor touches. I have to have at least 3 a week. So making sure that we continue to have all of that information. But we're only spending 5 minutes because guess what? If on the scorecard there's something that is not, what if I only talked to one donor last week? I'm in the red because I didn't meet it. We don't talk about it then. We drop it down. Hit the software, put on the issues list, it goes to the issues list. Then we review our rocks, right? Because you can't forget those 90-day goals. So Mario, after adult education plan for next year, on track or off track? On track, great. Go down the list, on track or off track, on track or off track. If they say it's off track, drop it down. Goes on the issues list. Because you don't want to waste time talking about it yet, right? And you've got to be true to the model. And this is the part that's hard when you've got a team if you're going to self-implement, because it's very difficult to get everybody to understand all of this by yourself, right? It takes a lot of training. And then you have people headlines. All right, are there any people headlines? Yes, Maria had a baby. Or, oh, goodness, we just got $100,000 from Chick-fil-A. Maybe. And that will make the headlines. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, no. And then we go through the to-do list, right? So if something didn't get done on the to-do list, drop it down. We want to talk about it. And then the meat of the meeting, here, the issues list. 60 minutes. And then the beauty is that you take those issues and you go ahead and you start with the ones that are, maybe you pick them. All right, anybody got any issues that they want to add to the list? No? Fantastic. What issues do you guys want to take? Anybody want to fight for an issue? Yes, we've got to talk about this today. Put them at the top. You start working through them. We're good now, and we're so systematized, we can get through 16 or 18 issues in a day and not leave anything on the issues list. In the early days, we weren't really good at IDSing, identifying, detecting, and solving issues, so it took a little bit longer. And then you conclude. It's a level 10 meeting because you rate the meeting. Shuffle her up. All right, 1 through 10. Anytime the meeting is below an 8, we have a conversation. Why? But if you're starting on time, ending on time, you're staying true to the agenda, we hit all 10s now. Not in the early days, though. So this is your meeting pulse, and then this is your solving session. And it really systematizes everything for our nonprofit. I want to be really, really honest with you all. This has allowed us to break through the ceiling. We went ahead and started, I told you in 2018, we're at about $800,000. We're going to break $2 million this year. That is some fast growth. And how did we do it? It's because we had to restructure, we had to get the systems built, and we had to make sure that we had the right people on the team and get everybody rowing in the same direction. Every quarter, I do a state of the organization. I review the VTO with all 50 staff and go through everything that's happened. What happened? Where are we now? And where are we going? Continuing to keep them bought into your vision. This right here is a great opportunity for all of you. If you've not read Traction and you want a free copy of the book, hit the QR code, go get your free book. Share it with anybody else in your organization. I did put the link here in case the QR code decided to malfunction. But this is specifically for all of you today. Traction is such an incredible tool. I am an open book. I got where I am today because I asked and worked with a lot of other executive directors, and a lot of people helped me along the way. And I'm here to help any of you at any point. If you have questions, if you want to learn more, if you just want to have a conversation with me, we can go grab lunch. Part of what we need to do is support one another. I think it's so important and so critical for the work that we're doing. And I don't want to pretend I have all the answers, because I don't. I'm still searching for more and more answers. But I am willing to share what I have learned with any of you at any point in time. So I don't know if you have my information. I'll give you my cell phone. You guys want my cell phone? I'll give it to you. It's 404-597-7264. Text me. Call me. I'm happy to meet you guys for coffee or for lunch, or even just jump on a Zoom call. Because I do think that we all need to really work together in this space, right? It's hard work, but it's so important. And the support we give the community is pivotal. So I want to be there for all of you as well. I want to make sure I leave a few minutes for Q&A. So we've got, it looks like about 10 minutes left. So let's do it. What kind of questions do we have? Yes, sir.
How do you interact with your board at EOS?
Oh, so this is great. I give them a little report called my EOS report, and I just hit on the high-level things. But in the realm of the day-to-day, they're not in the software. I just kind of keep them apprised of, what we're doing, quarterly conversations with our staff. Every quarter, my staff has a conversation. We do annual conversations. I let them know the big pieces that they want to understand about it, and I've developed a report that gives them that, so I don't have to spend time in the meeting talking about it. Uh-huh. Yes.
So it's actually funny that this is the operating system you're talking about, because we are currently implementing this at Big Brothers Big Sisters right now. Like, we're reading the book doing all these steps you said, so it was really nice to kind of hear that from you. You'd mentioned being able to work through like 18 issues in a meeting, which is astonishing to me. Like, we're good to get through one, because we end up in that meeting like really getting in the weeds about how this team's going to manage this and talking to this person. Like, how are you so efficiently solving those
Who,
issues?
what? 3 sentences. Put it on the issues list and write it out. Who, what? Who has the issue? Who is it about? And what's the issue? And then you don't want to go down rabbit holes or have tangents, because people like to talk about everything that's already how. Well, I mean, this is such a problem because of this. Oh, and then they did this, and then this, and you end up going on all these side tangents. So we call each other out. Like in our meetings, it's tight. If somebody starts going on a tangent, we're like, tangent alert. Like, bring it back. What is the issue? And then you've got to be able to solve and get to the root cause, right? Sometimes you're putting Band-Aids on things and it keeps reappearing. You haven't found the root of the issue. So it's really important that you train. So we do a lot of training with our staff. The first book, anybody that comes to work for LaAmistad will get the book, What the Heck is EOS? That's the best first book for people. Traction is a little deeper and a lot meatier, but they have to read What the Heck is EOS. If they're a manager, they have to read How to Be a Great Boss. They're all by Gino Wickman, fantastic books. But it gives them the tools, and then we, in our quarterlies, we'll go over the issues list. We'll go over how do you IDS, how do you identify an issue, detect it, and then how do you solve it. And so there's an IDS sheet, and I'm happy to share any of this with you, but there's a nice one-pager. Are you self-implementing, or do you have a facilitator?
We have a facilitator.
So your facilitator probably has given you guys a big notebook, and it should have the tools in there.
They've done like a session with our executive leadership, and then it's like I'm on program leadership, and so we have our next kind of follow up with them maybe next week, that they're including now like my layer of leadership.
Okay.
So I don't know what all the tools
So-
they've brought in yet.
So you guys are just starting then? How long has your leadership team been?
I think this will be like our 90-day.
The first 90 days?
Yeah. Mhm.
So it's something that takes time, right? I am 2 years in at this point in time. And so we're really there. In fact, I have my full annual with our facilitator, and then we're done. And I'm sad. I'm going to miss him so much, but he'll always be a friend. But what I would say is that you guys will get better at it. You've got to learn those tools, learn to tighten it up, and your leadership team, whoever's facilitating your meeting, has to really understand how to facilitate it well and be able to call folks out and keep them on track, right? It's really easy for those sidebars to happen. So we've had a lot of conversations where we've tightened it up.
Okay, sorry, I'm gonna ask
No.
a follow-up question.
Yep.
What also has been happening is we'll be like, okay, yeah, this is a bigger issue, and then we're setting up like more meetings to talk about it, and now I'm like, oh my god, I'm in meetings all day long. Like, how do you solve like a big issue so quickly?
Well, I mean, if it's something that is super meaty, it could become a long-term issue where it's not really something that you can tackle now. Maybe you don't have the resources yet. Maybe it's something that's much larger, and so we move it from short-term to long-term, and then we have to solve it later. Or it's something, there's every once in a while there'll be something, especially like a planning session that has to happen. But for the most part, with the issues, you've really got to get honed in on what the root cause is, and really spend the time looking at that one pager on IDSing, and then having folks do some homework in between. Our issues got long when folks weren't teeing them up right. So our team now has to write the who, what right in the issue. So when we're solving it, we've got everything that we need right there. I saw a hand here, and then I'll come here and here. Yes?
So we're not leaders on our team, we're employees. And so we have some very visionary leaders who aren't systematized. How would you recommend that we encourage the adoption of EOS from the bottom up rather than the top down?
I would share the tool with them and tell you heard of an incredible resource for them, and let them know I'd be more than happy to meet with them or speak with them if that would be helpful, just to help them understand that these tools are out there. Sometimes folks don't even understand such a thing exists.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that can be half the battle. That's where I struggled for many years.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Absolutely. Yes.
So we are right where you said you were around 800,000 wanting to get to 2 million, and this sounds great. What feels overwhelming to me is I don't think I even have time to read a book. Like, what was your first step? How did you make time to do this really important thing to get here?
Well, that was part of the restructuring, really, is beginning to understand what are the most best and highest uses of my time. And I was drowning in programming, and I had to get out. So I had to develop those teams and those folks below so that I would have the capacity to begin to read a book, right? We can't put too much on our plate. And if you don't have the capacity, that's an issue, right? That's that GWC, get it, want it, have the capacity to do it. So there may be some restructuring that may need to happen. Maybe something needs to get split off so that that can be something that you can add. You can't, if you're working in the business all day and you never work on the business, you're never going to grow. And that's why we have these quarterlies. That's why you have these meetings, because you have to work on the business. And if you're not, and you're just spinning your wheels, taking care of the sand all day, you're just going to keep spinning your wheels. So at some point, you've got to say, you know what, this is a bigger priority. Other hands, yes.
I'm at a legacy organization, so it's an organization that's a $15 million budget. But I was wondering so we have systems in place. Many of them reflect what EOS is. However, we have a program that I'm here to kind of learn about, where I think that there may be benefit in implementation of a type of program like this to kind of get us out of the weeds and get those team leads to come out of the weeds to grow that program that's foundational to who we are. Is that possible to do, or is EOS much more kind of organization-wide? Does it need to be applied throughout the organization, or can it be something that could be implemented at a programmatic level to work with just a specific team around specific goals?
I would say it should start at the top with your visionary and your associate or your integrator, and that's really going to allow it to go all the way down and make sure that those systems are utilized, because if it just went down on one program, then others in the organization may not understand and may not be working as effectively as they could. I'm not the expert on EOS. I'm 2 years in. It's a good question, and maybe it is possible. It's just hard to understand. I would say that there's a lot of nonprofits that have like a national office, and then you've got kind of a regional office. I would think that you could adopt it regionally as long as your head there was bought in. But I think coming from the top down really allows it to have a stickiness so that it can flow in both directions.
Yeah, as a nonprofit leader, right, we're always balancing productivity, but also just being incredibly compassionate leaders to our staffs who are doing hard things all day long.
Mm-hmm.
And so in this system, where is there still space for that culture and care, right? Like, I mean, I know that clarity is kindness, right, and that everybody being on the same page, but it feels like there could be a tendency to just be doing and not being caring, and I think as nonprofit leaders, we care for staff more than other kinds of leaders.
It's all about your core values. For us, we care for our staff deeply, and we all hire, fire, reward, recognize against those core values. And kindness is the first thing that we work on, right? And so having those relationships are incredibly important. I am the executive director. I have one direct report, but it doesn't mean that I don't talk with all of the other staff and pour into them and love on them. We've got some really tough things going on in a couple of our after-school programs right now with some terrible abuse, and I'm having calls at night with them. It systematizes the work, but it doesn't eliminate that need for us to connect with one another, because that's so critical. And my associate director is the culture ambassador. She is fantastic. And at any point in time really helps to own that.
Is there with that, or does it actually just enhance?
I think it enhances everything, because you've got everybody that are bought into those same values, and when all those values align and we're all caring for one another at every level of the business, then I think it allows folks to really grow organically. It's all about having honest conversations with people. When you have people that aren't on track, it's not anything that we wait. I don't wait till a quarterly review. It's right there in the now. I'm sorry, this is not personal, but you were late for work today, and it's not okay. We had an event, right? I'm not going to apologize for it, and that's also important as well.
Last question.
Do you have any suggestions for someone whose leadership won't adopt this or a system to kind of streamline this process in order to kind of like lead up? Or
I think that's one of the hardest things in nonprofit, and where I see people get stuck is that the folks below understand that this is so needed, and then the leader doesn't understand it. And that can be really unfortunate at times. You know, sometimes I've seen people even go above the leader to the board to talk about the things that are broken below, but that's where it can be really sticky if you're not the person that's actually in that leadership role. And it could be that it's not the right leader, and that can be hard as well. So yeah, I mean, that's hard to say, right? If you've got somebody that's stuck and they're up in this level, I mean, unfortunately, that's where it can be really sticky because the board's got to deal with it. And if they're not aware, sometimes that awareness is half the battle. Sometimes they may just reporting to the board all warm and fuzzy, and it's not really that.
All right, well, let's thank Kat.
Thank you.